Welcome back to the Real Talk Corner podcast, where we dive deep into personal journeys and topics that can inspire and transform us on a mind, body, soul, and spirit level. I'm your host, Ariana Gutierrez, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Michelle Steiner. Michelle is a writer, speaker, photographer, and educator who has triumphed over a learning disability. Despite being told she couldn't go to college, earn a bachelor's degree, or land a job she wanted, Michelle defied the odds and achieved all that and more. Join us as we explore her incredible journey, the challenges she overcame, and the powerful message she has for anyone facing similar obstacles. Get ready to be inspired and uplifted. Let's dive in. The Real Talk Corner. We back. We in the building. As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, fighting my way through the darkness where the wicked don't rest. Conscious aware, truth I dare, shields tied to my chest. My tenacity can put these motherfuckers to the test. High priestess of fire, alchemistic desire. I say manifest and shit, even when I am tired. You can call me amazing, by the bricks I be laying, but you'll never call me lazy, cause my vibes are devastating. In the league of my own, spitting real talk energy. I know a little something about a thing called synergy. This is old radio, throw a sending masses awaken me, listen up, cause we about to set your mind, body, and soul free. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Real Talk Corner. Today, with my special guest, Michelle Steiner, I'm going to let her tell a little bit about herself before we jump into our meat and potatoes.
Sure. Well, my name is Michelle Steiner. I live in Pennsylvania with my husband Ron and our two cats, Jack and Sparrow. I am a writer, a speaker, and a photographer. I also work in a school as a paraeducator with students who have disabilities and some who don't. And as I said, I'm also a writer and a photographer, and I have a blog called Michelle's Mission where I write about life with a learning disability.
I love that. I was going to ask you, what was a paraeducator?
Sure, that's a teacher's aide.
Okay, for those of us who didn't know now, I was like, I have to ask her when she gets on. I wanted you to just go in a little bit of your journey from being diagnosed and what that felt like. And because I know, all of us, this whole thing with being normal and not normal, right? And what society says is normal and whatnot. And I wanted to talk about this because there's a lot of parents who are afraid for their children to be on this list like they have a disability, like it's the end of the world. And so a lot of parents do not get the proper help their children need because of the stigma. So this is why I wanted to have this conversation today. But let's go into your journey.
Sure.
How did that? Let's.
Yeah, sure. I can remember I was diagnosed with a learning disability whenever I was in kindergarten. I
Mhm.
was my parents' first child, so they didn't have a whole lot to base development on. I had a preschool teacher that thought something was going on, but during that time, they really didn't know exactly what that was, and they didn't have specialized preschools or birth to three services as we do now.
Right.
So my parents sent me off to kindergarten, and I really struggled in the classroom. I was really struggling with tying my shoes. I had
Mhm.
difficulty with dot to dot pages. I can remember I would get one of them, and I thought, oh, I did it perfect, and it turned out it was not. I also struggled with my eye hand coordination, and math was the biggest issue. That was something. Counting, just understanding how numbers work, even from when I was very young, was hard for me. So my teacher recommended that I get tested for having one. And it was no surprise to anybody that I did indeed have, in fact, have a learning disability. During that time, they did not give it a specific diagnosis. They just said, oh, learning disability. But they knew I was not going to be a math genius when I was 5 or 6. That was pretty clear. And I had to repeat kindergarten the following year in a different school, and I had to start receiving specialty instruction as well.
Right, right. Ooh. I know that that is hard. I'm like, because I mean, I'm in my 40s. So
Mhm.
when I was a kid, there was no names to anything. They didn't have autism. They didn't have ADHD. They didn't have any of those terms. You know, so it literally
Mhm.
was just like that. Learning disability. I actually flunked the first grade like almost 3 times. So I was the kid who was not present in the classroom. Now, yes, I had a lot of stuff going on at home, but I still just wasn't comprehending and I couldn't get what was in my mind out. And that's been something my whole life. So, you know, I want people to understand that just because like they have to say something, right? When you're in there, they have to give you some diagnosis. They got to put something on paper to
Right.
see what's going on. But we all learn at such a different rate. And I wish that they taught that. And I wish that that's the way that they pushed you to learn how you learn instead of trying to mold you into learning and focusing like how everyone else does. Because I was like, if you would have had me outside, I would have learned. You know, if they could have taught me outside in the dirt and the mud, I would have been good. I was not good in the classroom. So I do understand the feeling of just that being left back and having to repeat the grades, and then just feeling like my brother was the A student. So he was the A student, and I was
Mhm.
the loopy. So hopefully she'll get it together, child.
Yeah, that would be difficult, definitely.
It is. So, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced coming up far as education? I know you spoke a little bit about it, but when you got to the higher grades, what did that look like?
Academically, it got a lot easier for me. I was in all regular ed classes except for math. That never worked well when I was even in a basic class.
Right.
And I had a resource room. And I was doing really well with having the test read aloud to me. I was doing really great with my English classes, history.
Right.
It got a lot easier for me. I even made honor roll consistently for a number of years. Socially, it got a lot harder for me though. I can just remember whenever I was really young, the bullying started very early. I went to a very small school district where everybody knew each other's business. I
Mm,
couldn't hide that I was going to learning support for a class or to have a test read aloud to me or have extra time on it. And I quickly got labeled the dumb kid and the outcast. And when I was really young, it was, oh, I don't want to play with you on the playground. You're not invited to my birthday party. Well, what really happened as I got older, the peer groups became a lot more defined. And I just didn't feel like I fit in with any of them. And it got to the point where there was threats made at some point. It was really bad. And one of the things I used to wonder, okay, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I make any friends? And eventually the light bulb just kind of clicked that I wasn't going to be connecting with people that I went to school with.
right.
So what I ended up doing was I found an art group that was in a neighboring school district, just a little bit away, and I was with other kids that I didn't go to school with. And they were interested in the same thing I did. So I could shed this reputation that followed me. And I found acceptance for that. And that made it a lot easier when I went to school, just to be able to handle my peers. And then whenever I stopped hanging out with them, I found an adult writing group
Mm,
that these people were just a couple years older than I was. And I was hanging out with them on the weekends. We were having fun. And they got to not only see me grow as a writer, but as a person. And 20 some years later, we still meet together once a month to talk about our writing, and we're in each other's lives. So that was a real blessing for me to have that.
right.
Another thing that was real significant during those high school years was what was the plan whenever I left school. I knew that I wanted to go to college, but not everybody agreed with that I could do that. I doubted myself. I thought,
Mm,
well, how am I going to handle this with the math?
right.
I I'm in learning support. I can't even get a very basic math level.
Mm,
And I worried, okay, I'm doing great in my other classes. How am I going to be able to handle even the ones I'm doing good in? And I wasn't alone in that. I had a learning support teacher who told me, based on your math, I would not I don't think you can go to college. Why don't you go to this trade school, which was a good school, but nothing
right.
there really interested me. So
Right.
went forward. I got involved with Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, a wonderful agency. They pay for testing. They also pay for college. They pay for accommodations. They can even help with job placement and assistance afterwards. And I
Mm,
had to get tested for having a learning disability all over again with them.
right.
And sure enough, I never score very well on these tests. And the psychiatrist who was looking at my scores said, well, you're most likely not going to go beyond a community college. So there were some real concerns that I had as a high school student.
Right. Right. That's very discouraging too, because like the
Mm-hmm.
people who are that are supposed to guide you and advise you can be
Mm-hmm.
so negative and deter you from maybe why not try though? Like
Exactly. Why
why
not?
not? They're just like, nope, not gonna make it. Go do something else. That's crazy to me. I don't understand it. I don't.
No, they
Um,
don't.
yeah. Kids are, I don't want to ever say kids are mean because I think it's definitely how you raise your kid, how things are instilled in your child's life,
Mm-hmm.
and how the influences that your child has. And I
Right.
feel like that is definitely missing. And it's not something that just happened in the last couple decades. It's something that's been there forever. And children act how they're allowed to act. And that
Mm-hmm.
being mean, that I could see some kids are just not going to get along because of different personalities and, things like that. But when it comes to just singling children out and, that kind of thing, just because someone learns different or they look
Mm-hmm.
different and those kind
Yeah.
of things, I feel like is the bad part, and that parents should look at that and say, how are your kids acting? How are they reacting to other children? You know,
Right.
are they nice and kind, or are they these little shits at school? It's like,
Right. And what are you teaching, like some of those situations too, on how to handle other
right,
people as well? I think a
right.
lot of that goes back to, yeah, the parents and what they are teaching their children about that.
Well, they also see, because a lot of parents, I
Mm-hmm.
think, and I've become someone who's very aware in my life now. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, there was times, decades of me not being aware of just how I am in
Right.
certain situations, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, you may not think that you're mean, but you could be very mean out there, and your child is watching everything you do, from how you talk to
Yep.
the teller, how you talk to the person in the drive-through, how you respond to
Exactly.
phone calls when someone's calling you. Are you having these
Mm-hmm.
conversations and you think your child isn't listening? They're listening to everything of how you interact with people. So when some parents are like, oh, I don't teach my child to be like that, I'm like, no, but they see that.
They see that, and that's not to jump ahead, but that is one of the things they tell us when we do our trainings with our work in the school,
Mm,
is a lot of these kids, we might be one of the few places that they see positive adult interaction.
right,
So we're teaching them by not just by saying, oh, be nice to somebody, but they're watching us, how we interact in the classroom. So that kind of gives us an idea of how to model behavior.
right, right. I know for
Mm-hmm.
me, school was that kind of getaway from home. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like a lot of kids, like that's their getaway. And yeah, a lot of parents are kind of clueless to everything.
Right.
Is you could say everything, oh, don't do this and don't do that, but it's what you show
Yeah.
them, how you
I
act, how you
agree.
treat people, right?
100%.
So I think the awareness is what has to
Mm-hmm.
come of, and it's crazy because when my daughter got older, she started to point out some things for me where, like, just us
Mm-hmm.
in a drive-through, and I would be so all over the place that I didn't even realize how I was treating the person taking my order or the person trying to get the
Mm-hmm.
money and not saying thank you or not saying certain things. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like I didn't even realize that I'm so clueless to this person, instead of just taking a moment to acknowledge them, taking a moment to, thank them, taking a
Mm-hmm.
moment to speak to them. And again, again, you can walk around and be clueless of what you're doing, or you can start to become very aware of your actions. And then the children coming up
Mm-hmm.
in can also say, okay, this isn't right. This is not what we do. This is not how we
Yeah.
treat other people, right?
Exactly.
So what got you, because I know you said art, you kind of got into this art class, which I feel like a lot of people who struggle with the
Mm-hmm.
learning part, the art calls, right? The cart calls, it's just something about it. It taps in on a different level. So what really, when you were doing the art, because you said you have photography and writing, what about
Right.
photography did you kind of go into and like?
Right. Now with the writing, that came when I was very young. I can remember my dad found a story I wrote about a dinosaur whenever I was in second or third grade. He said, "Wow, this is really good." And prior to that, I didn't think I was good at anything. And he would always read to me stories, and that kind of became my world. And then I'd be frustrated because I couldn't draw a straight line. So I joined with their newsletter team at that time with the writing.
Mhm.
Now the photography, that was unexpected. I can remember I had an older woman that was in my writing group that could see my potential. I went to prom and I took a picture of a tree that was at the venue. And all my
Mhm.
peers, they were like, "Why'd you take a picture of a tree? This is really dumb." And when I showed it to that older woman, my prom picture, she looked at that picture where that tree was at the venue and said, "Wow, this shows perspective."
Right.
And for so many years, I put that on the shelf. I focused in on writing. I think I wrote some bad poetry, and I just thought, okay, I'm not good at art. I'm terrible. I remember I had lots of discussions with a friend of mine that I wasn't good at that. And he said, "Well, I think you could do something with that too. There's being good at it, and there's just everybody can do it. It's just whether or not you're good at and finding what you are good at doing."
Right.
And a couple years years passed, still didn't, you know, did some stuff with the writing, but I can just remember we were at a family wedding, my husband and I, and we went to a cemetery and we took some pictures of some angels. And I had a friend that was looking at them, and she was very particular about things. And she said, "Wow, these are really amazing." And I thought, well, if she liked it, I must have done something right because she did not just give out compliments to give out compliments. And
Right.
I thought, okay, I'm going to maybe submit this to an art center. And I can remember I got an honorable mention at a show. And that encouraged me to take more pictures.
Right.
And I'm able to drive. I'm not able to drive because of my learning disability. So I'm really blessed to have a wonderful husband that can take me to work, a great coworker that can take me home. But I notice details that other people miss. I'll be in the passenger seat and I'll say to my husband, "Did you see this?" And he'll say, "No, I'm focused on the road."
Right.
And when I'm on my walks, back wherever I need to go, I get that chance to literally stop and smell the roses and
Mhm.
take pictures of flowers. And I could just be sad about not being able to drive or not having a ride, but I would miss that shot. I would miss so many things if I was sitting there driving. And I get the chance to put that on my blog, on my online store. And I also use a lot of nature metaphors with writing. I
Mm.
had a friend in my writers group who told me I should really write about having a learning disability. And I said, "Oh, no, that's too personal. I don't want anyone else to know about that."
Right.
And I can remember whenever I got our first house after college. I mean, years passed. I got married. We got a home, and I could not. They found out I had limited hand dexterity, so I could not open up our front door, and I was so frustrated. And there was a call on the mighty for what's a seemingly easy task for other people, but it's really hard with your disability.
Right.
And I decided I'm going to write about that. And it got published. And I got a really great response. People were saying, "Well, that's my story. I thought I was the only one that struggled with that." So that encouraged me to write more articles and to start my blog and just to submit to other places as well. And that has been one of the most healing things that I've ever done is writing and photography.
Definitely. I've talked about this on a couple different podcasts with people because when you're writing, about your story, and
Mm-hmm.
it is very personal, sometimes it does bring up a lot of emotions because
Mm-hmm.
reliving those moments aren't really the best feeling. But that just coming into a place of understanding you're not alone. There's so many other people that have
Yes.
been through it, and when you're there, by you just speaking about what you've gone through, it inspires so many others to say, wow, this is something that's happened to me. Let's talk about this. Because then we bring
Right.
it to the table and we can have these conversations about it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love it. I think writing definitely, I have a friend, she's a journal. She's always like, get the journal, journal everything. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't have anything to talk about. And I'm just like, once you just start talking or just writing, things just flow. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just like when we're looking at art. And I think we're always comparing ourselves to what we
Hmm.
think it's supposed to be, right? Well, I can't write. I'm not a writer. And it's just like, well, you could write anything. You can put anything down, writing your story. There's so many different ways and forms to do it, even painting and art and photography, all of it. It's based on you of what you bring. And I think we're always comparing of what we think that means, what we think a photographer is supposed to do, what we,
Hmm.
the artist is supposed to do. I'm like you. I'm always taking pictures of sunsets and trees and all
Yes.
of those things on the side of the road. I have millions of just passing by, taking pictures out of the because you just there's this all this other beauty to life. And
Yes.
it is kind of sad when other people just look at it like a tree. Like, no, but there's so much more going on with this picture. I'm a tree hugger, so for me, I'm like,
Yes.
I get it. I get it.
Agreed.
um, what experiences, especially with the learning disability, influenced you to like do the speaking? Because you also have speaking that you do. So how did that influence
Yes.
you, or kind of help you in any way?
Well, a lot of times with the speaking, I want to be able to I want to share my story because everybody has hopes and everybody has dreams, especially people that have disabilities. So one of my recent places that I spoke at was at a transition conference at the end of July in State College.
Mhm.
And I talked about how to have a successful transition plan. And we talked about, well, what are your hopes? What are your dreams? And just some resources that people can do, because I think it's really hard for a person with a disability because sometimes you feel alone. You feel like you're the only one that has it.
Yep.
I can remember when I was young, before we had the internet and a lot more resources, I didn't know anybody that had a math disability. And most of the places that had stories about people that had learning disabilities were men, and they had reading disabilities, and it was dyslexia. So I really felt like, oh, where do I fit in on a lot of this? So I try to go out and I try to share my story and my experiences with that. And I also try to just talk on number of different things and just be really honest. Whenever I went to college, I faced so much stigma that I didn't use disability accommodations. And that's definitely not something you want to do because your grades will drop even lower, or at least mine did.
Right.
And I want to help other people to be able to know that they're not alone, and just what has helped me, and to look for the resources that can help them as well. And I like to put those in pretty simple to easy terms so people can understand that as well.
Right, right. I love it because it does open up a door, and you
Mm-hmm.
know this from experience of how bad you can feel with everyone telling you of what you can't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do this,
Right.
you can't do that, you're not gonna be good at this, and there's all of this negativity, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe still finding that energy or that inspiration within you to go, well, I'm still gonna try this. I'm still
Yep.
gonna commit to this. I'm still gonna do this. And I think that's awesome because there's a lot of people that just stop. They just stop. They just quit, and it's like, I'll never do it. They told me I'll never do it. Right? This is nope. This is
Right.
And
Definitely.
it's never too late. So no matter
Yeah.
who's watching this, I definitely want you guys to know
Mm-hmm.
never too late to do something, to change your life, to grow, to start. Just you just have to say, you know what? I want to change something, right? I want to change it. I'm going to do it. I see I'm not alone. It can be done, right? Because you're a testament to that. It can be done. You can
Yes.
work. You just got to find what works for you,
Yeah,
right?
that's the main thing. It's just finding what works for each person. For me, that looks like I had to avoid math. All the kids know, or will soon find out. Do not ask me to help you with your math. I can't do that, but I can help you with reading. I can help you with your English work. I can do a lot of that. And sometimes a lot of the things I do encounter with some difficulties in my life, I just have to find ways to work around them.
Right.
And it may not always come in the way that I think it's going to. Success doesn't always come in the package that I expect it, but sometimes it comes in something even better.
Right. And there's so many more resources now, though. There are
Yes.
so many, and that's what I find. I see more of the parents that are
Hmm.
afraid to label their children, right? Because it's all about what everybody else thinks. And then, the stigmas versus because there's actually so much more assistance and things that you can do, especially online. I mean, you can find
Yeah.
all these kind of really neat tricks and tips and things like
Hmm.
that. Which I'll definitely have your link to your blog so that they can find you
Sure.
and read it. So I think today it's a lot easier to just you want to learn what's going on with you because we all, like I said, we all learn differently. We all have our you
Yes.
don't have to be like everybody else, and if you don't learn like everybody else, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Um,
Exactly.
What advice would you give people, especially with learning disabilities, that want to really aspire or pursue their goals and dreams? I know we kind of talked about that, but what would you give them? Because sometimes I feel like those goals just feel unreachable, right?
Right. I think the very first thing is to know what you want to do. I think that that's really important because you have to have that drive. You have to have that passion. I know that if I would have went to trade school to be a cook or to be a beautician, I wouldn't have had that drive and that passion, and it would have been really hard for me.
Right.
And I think also it's that after you know what you want, it's finding a way to do it and to make really good decisions with that. I knew that I wanted to work with kids. I knew that I wanted to do something in education, but I knew being a certified teacher wasn't going to be an option for me. So I
Mm,
had to be realistic about my disability. I had to be someone that said, all right, I want to do this, but I can't be a certified teacher. I know that if I go and I do this, it's going to set me up from failure, and I just didn't want to go and waste those years.
right.
So I decided I was going to be a teacher's aide or work as maybe in a childcare. And I found programs that I could do. I found an early childhood program. I didn't know exactly what I was doing at that point. That's when I think I didn't do well the first time. But when I went to university, I knew what I needed. I knew that I needed to go for a program that had the least amount of math and science possible. And I found a way that we studied more of the service end of working with people with disabilities. And I
Right.
think it's also silencing those who are trying, well meaning people who are trying to give you advice sometimes, but you know in your heart isn't the right way. I knew that there was somebody in my life that said, if you could just get your act together, I bet you could be a certified teacher. And it just was not the right thing to do. And I just had to learn to say, okay, I don't think that that's helpful advice for me, but here's what I can do. And anytime I focus on what I can do, it's so much more empowering and a happier experience than when I focus on what I can't.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's very easy to let others. Some people are just um, they're basing their opinions based on their life, their life
Yep.
experiences and their fears and all of those things. So when people are giving us advice, as helpful as they think they are,
Hmm.
sometimes it's just not it. It's just not it. And you got to take it with a grain of salt and go,
Hmm.
all right, is this what I really want to do? Because I'm not good at math either. I am horrible at math. And I am literally in school now to get my psychology. And one of my last classes,
Okay.
our met is the general math, the algebra, the pre-algebra class I need. And it's a struggle. It is a
Hmm.
struggle for me. I'm like, why do I even need math? I'm not doing anything with math. And because I personally am one of the people who, when I look at things that I'm learning, I have to
Hmm.
like it. I have to have
Yep.
some interest in it, or else it will not stay in my brain. It will not stay there. I can't hold on to it. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, you can't explain to me why we need algebra. There's nothing that anyone can tell me of why do I need to know this. It doesn't make sense to my mind. So my mind is like, why are we learning this? So yeah, I
On
there's
that. Yeah, and in fact, when I work with my students and they'll say, "Well, what am I going to use this?" I've given up on saying, "Well, yeah, you'll use it in your life," because I don't know if they will. So I tell them, I say, "You know what? I don't know if you're going to need this someday in your life or not, but we're just trying to give you a bunch of different things right now, and what you decide you're going to do with that education, it is up to you at the end."
All right, I'm like, I can count my money.
Hmm. Yeah.
The basic math is like, okay, everyone should do that. But once you start going on to the x's
Yeah.
and y's and exponents and all this other crap, I'm like,
Hmm.
why do we need this? Because I cannot tell
Right.
you not one time in my 40 years on this planet did I need algebra in anything that I have done for myself.
Exactly. Yep. You know, and one of the things I did was I did a philosophy-based math course where all I
Mm,
had to do was just pass. So that was the nice
right.
thing to be able to do. But I agree with you. I mean, sometimes those classes that you would take, yeah, when are you going to use this? I mean,
Never,
yep, I hear
ever,
you.
ever. They're pointless.
Hmm. Agree, 100%.
um, I wanted to ask you, are there some ways that you think society or the educational system can better support individuals with learning disabilities?
I think that there are some ways that they can. One of the biggest ways is to really meet the person where they're at, not just put this rubber stamp on somebody and say, all right, you have a learning disability. We're going to give you accommodations, but you need to be in with every kid that's in a basic class. Or look at a kid that maybe you have to be in basic classes for every single thing or learning support. It's really, maybe some of them can handle some higher order classes. Maybe some can do need certain ones in the basic. And I think it's just meeting that person where they're at, not just putting that rubber stamp on them and saying, well, this is what people with learning disabilities do.
Right,
Because I saw so many of my peers, I'm not friends with them, but I've heard that some of them have been in jail. Some of them have addiction. Some of them can't hold down jobs.
right,
And they didn't go to college. And I'm not saying college is for everybody, but they didn't follow what their heart was. They followed that plan that this is what people with learning disabilities do because they're not smart enough to do other things. So
right.
that's the first thing. And I think it's also understanding what learning disabilities are. I still have to advocate for myself at the job that I'm at. And I
Mm,
have to tell people I have a learning disability. And that's so important because people just look at me and think, well, she should be able to understand math.
right.
And I have to explain that. And I think sometimes when we have teachers, especially ones that are really passionate about what they do, which is great, but I
Hmm.
think it's hard sometimes to be able to understand that you might have a student and that's in that class and they want to do well and they want to understand what you're saying, but they may not be able to do it. And it's not because they're not working or they're not trying. They might just need a different way to learn. So you might have to present things in a different way for that to happen.
Right, right. Because it sounds good to you. You understand it. It's in
Yeah.
here. They understand it. Yeah, I know I did. I had a few
Hmm.
teachers that stood out to me that took the time,
Yeah.
to really understand their students and knew
Hmm.
how their students, but not every teacher does. Of course, not every teacher can. We wish in a perfect world that they all, had the
Yep.
ability, but a lot of them don't. I know a lot of them are overwhelmed, tons of kids, especially public school, tons of
Hmm.
kids, and I do feel that that definitely will become a problem if it continues. I know there's a teacher shortage also in a lot of
Yes.
states right now, so that doesn't help the
Hmm.
education system at all. But I do feel like if parents and teachers can come together, then they can better help their child versus ignoring it, or unfortunately, like some of the teachers who don't even see it. I'm kind of the child that no one really saw. They just were too much was going on, so I just got, lost in the sauce in the
Hmm.
education system. So there was never a plan to assist me to learn. It was either you learn it or you don't. You get help
Yes.
or you don't. That's just kind of
Right.
it. Doesn't help your your kids either. I kind of grew up thinking I was horrible at school altogether. So in my mind, I was horrible at school.
Hmm.
But I also too had this love for writing. So I remember writing these stories when I was
Hmm.
little. Although I was horrible at spelling. Don't ever put me in a spelling bee. I was horrible at spelling,
Same here.
but
Right.
I
Hmm.
had that knack of telling storytelling, and that was my thing. So I gravitated towards that and music and poetry and things like that. So I'm like, we just all have this difference. Unfortunately, education hasn't, or especially public education hasn't caught up to that. where we're looking at it as an individual versus trying to put everybody in the box, and
Exactly.
these tests that they have to
Mm-hmm.
get funding and all of these things are, I think it's a little worse sometimes in some areas, at least what I've
Yes.
noticed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So those teachers listening to this, maybe you guys can come together and make make some bigger changes, um,
Exactly.
so that it's more normalized. I don't want anyone to ever look at that term and like learning disability and think like, oh, you're something's wrong with you, and
Mm-hmm.
like it's a bad thing.
Right.
Unfortunately for society, they have to name it as something, but it really is just that we all learn different, and that they have this quote unquote normal, right? This quote unquote normal way to learn, but
Yes.
that's not really normal. There's so many of us that don't learn like that, that can't process like that, that aren't good at math.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons
Right.
of us that are out here,
Yeah.
and it should be normalized. And just people
Right.
differently, not oh, this person's slow or this person's this or that. Because it really, those terms irritate me when I kind of
I
see
know.
that.
Same here.
Before I go on a rant, right?
Right. Exactly. No, I know.
So you said you went to college. You didn't go to the trade, and then you decided that maybe going too far in the university was just like maybe no.
Well, I did get my bachelor's degree, but I carefully chose the right program for me. I chose community programming for Americans with disabilities. They call it a transition specialist now, and pretty much what that is you learn about how to different types of disabilities, how to help out someone in the classroom, just the impact of that. And we've got a lot of students, to my surprise, that were education majors and they could not pass the praxis. There's some that don't even have disabilities that can't pass that. And rather than give them an elementary ed degree or a secondary ed degree and have experience with being in the classroom and not be able to use it, we
Right.
want the school really wanted people to be able to have an option. So we had some students who couldn't do that, but they fell in love with it because you're still helping somebody, you're still working with people with disabilities, and it still gives you a bachelor's degree and stuff that you could take into a lot of different areas and work with that.
Wow. And all it takes is just really looking at your options, looking
Yes.
at what's available, correct? Instead of just thinking that
Hmm.
there's no options or there's no availability, or you're just asked out if if you don't, if
Right.
you have some
Yeah.
issues learning. Okay.
It's just a lot of different options. And there's even programs for students with intellectual disabilities that are starting to come up on college campuses
Mhm.
where they can audit classes. And then eventually, if they can do it, or that's definitely a good plan for them, they can be taking classes with supports and still having a degree. And I just think that there's so many options for people. It's just looking at what's available and seeing, okay, is this going to be a good choice or is this going to be something that isn't? And the interest, the motivation's a big factor, and just looking at all those different resources and making the best choice you can.
Right. Definitely. Well, I mean, I absolutely love that you've taken everything and you are sharing it in a positive way. And,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't let it hinder you. And I feel like you
Mm-hmm.
having that voice to tell others, like, hey, we are here. You hear,
Yes.
you have support. You're not the only one. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's a big thing. And you're making, I know sometimes when we're doing this, it feels like our impact is small, but it's so much bigger than
Mm-hmm.
that, because I believe the ripples make waves. So as you keep continuing to do what you're doing, you're going to touch so many people doing what you're doing, and I think that that's beautiful. So thank you
Thank
for coming
you.
on. I will have your links where you guys can go follow Michelle. You could go check out her blog. You can go, I don't know, support her in any way that you can. And that'll be in the description no matter where you're listening or where you're watching. You'll be able to look into the description and get those links. Okay, you guys. So, any last things you want to tell our viewers and listeners?
I just want to encourage people. The success doesn't always come in the package that you expect, but sometimes it comes in something even better.
Damn right. All right, you guys. Until next time, bye.